It was one of those nights in Chicago when the wind cuts through your jacket like it's made of paper. I remember standing by the frosted window of our old apartment, watching the city lights flicker below like they were mocking me bright, alive, expensive. Everything in Chicago felt expensive lately, especially my dreams. Clara, Mom's voice called from the kitchen, soft but tight, the kind of tone she used when she had bad news wrapped in politeness. I turned and saw her drying her hands, eyes darting away from mine. "We need to talk about college." The words froze me. College, my escape, my everything. I'd been accepted to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, something I'd worked for since freshman year. My whole life had been sketches, fabric swatches, late nights bent over my desk dreaming of becoming a designer. And now, Mom sighed, shaking her head. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. We just can't afford your tuition right now." My throat tightened. "What do you mean, can't afford it?" you and Dad said. "Things have changed." She interrupted quickly, eyes flicking toward the living room. "Your father's job cut his overtime, the bills have gone up, and, well, your brother's senior year has its own expenses. My brother." Derek, the golden boy, quarterback, family favorite. I felt my stomach twist. "So what about me?" I asked, voice trembling. Mom looked away. "You'll have to take a gap year. Maybe help out around the house, save up. You're smart, Clara. You'll figure it out." I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded, because that's what good daughters do. They swallow the lump in their throat and pretend it doesn't taste like betrayal. That night, as I lay in bed, the cold from the window seeped into my bones. My acceptance letter sat on my desk like a cruel joke. Hook, line, transition. If you've ever been told your dreams were too expensive, you'll understand what I felt that night. And before this story ends, you'll also see why my mother would one day regret underestimating me. So before we dive into this mess, subscribe, because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about realizing your worth when the people closest to you try to put a price tag on it. The next few weeks were quiet, too quiet. Mom avoided eye contact, Dad was suddenly working late, and Derek strutted around like he'd won the lottery. Every time he tossed his car keys on the counter, I wondered how we could be broke, yet still manage gas money for his endless drives. Then one night, I found out. I was scrolling Instagram, trying to distract myself from yet another rejection email from a retail job, when I saw Derek's story. There he was, standing in front of a shiny black BMW with a caption, "Can't believe Mom and Dad pulled this off. Best parents ever." My heart stopped. I zoomed in. The car was parked in our driveway. For a full minute, I just stared at the screen. My hands started shaking, and the edges of my vision blurred. Then I laughed, not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh, I'd cry. So this was it. Financial problems, huh? Apparently, the tuition of their daughter was less important than a set of leather seats and Bluetooth speakers for their precious son. I didn't confront them right away. Instead, I watched, listened, waited, because something inside me had shifted that night. A quiet, burning resolve started to grow. 2 days later, Mom came home with shopping bags, groceries. She said too quickly when she saw me staring. But the logo on one bag wasn't a grocery store, it was Nordstrom. I bit my tongue. I knew she was lying again, and it hurt more than I wanted to admit. I spent the next week applying for any freelance design gig I could find, sketching logos, making cheap mock-ups for Etsy sellers, even designing prom dresses for local girls. I was surviving on caffeine and spite. Then one message changed everything. A small Chicago boutique owner, Lydia Bloom, replied to my online portfolio. "Your designs are fresh," she wrote. "Meet me tomorrow at 3. I'm looking for new talent." I almost screamed. The next day, I wore my best thrift, store blazer, and rode the train downtown, hands clutching my sketchbook like it was sacred. The city looked different that day, louder, alive, full of possibilities. Lydia's shop was tucked in between 2 cafes, small but elegant. She flipped through my sketches slowly, her red nails tapping the pages. Then she smiled. "You've got something, kid, raw but real. How would you feel about helping design our spring collection?" I could barely breathe. "I'd love that," she nodded. "It's not a big paycheck yet, but if this works, you'll get exposure, real exposure." Exposure. The word usually made me roll my eyes, but this time it felt like a door cracking open. For the next 3 months, I worked like my life depended on it because it did. I balanced part-time gigs, late-night sketching sessions, and endless cups of cheap coffee. I didn't tell my family a word. Not one syllable. They thought I was still moping at home, taking a gap year. I let them think that. By February, Lydia's Boutique had launched my designs minimalist streetwear with Chicago grit and a feminine twist. And people loved it. Influencers tagged the store, orders doubled. Lydia gave me my first real check, $18,000. I stared at the number for a full minute. My first instinct wasn't to spend it, it was to save it. Invest it, plan, because I wasn't done yet. Then, just when things were finally turning around, Mom called me into the living room again. She was pacing, nervous. "Clara, honey, your brother's car insurance went up. We need help this month. Can you lend us $500?" I looked at her, the same woman who told me we couldn't afford my college tuition, now asking for help because Derek's car needed extra coverage. I smiled sweetly. "Sure, Mom. Let me think about it." That night, I sat by my window again, the same spot where this all started. But this time I wasn't crying. I was calculating. I started a new plan, quiet, steady, ruthless. I designed under a pseudonym Cree Studio. My initials, but stylized. I reinvested every dollar from Lydia's Boutique into launching my own small brand online. Within 4 months, Cree Studio was featured in a Chicago lifestyle blog. Orders started pouring in. By summer, I had enough to rent a tiny shared office space near Wicker Park. It smelled like paint and ambition. No one in my family knew. They didn't deserve to. But fate, it seems, has a flair for irony. A few weeks later, while I was packing for a pop-up event, Mom called again, voice trembling this time. "Clara, we need to talk. It's serious." I paused. What happened? Her words came in fragments. Your father's company, layoffs, mortgage payments, the car loan. For the first time, they were in trouble. And that's when everything came full circle. When Mom's voice cracked on the phone, I almost didn't recognize it. The woman who once told me, "We just can't afford your dreams right now," now sounded small, fragile. I could have said, "Good," or "You deserve it." But instead, I simply said, "I'll come by tomorrow." She sighed with relief. "Thank you, honey. We just need to figure some things out. Maybe you can help us. You've always been responsible." Responsible? That word echoed like a joke. Responsible enough to be denied, ignored, and left behind. But I didn't say it. I just smiled to myself. The next morning, I drove up to our house, their house, in an Uber. The BMW wasn't in the driveway. The dream car had vanished. When Mom opened the door, her eyes were red. She looked older, thinner. The confident woman who used to walk around in Nordstrom dresses now wore an oversized sweater. "Clara, thank you for coming." The living room was cluttered, unpaid bills stacked on the table like a paper mountain of guilt. Dad sat there too, staring at the floor. We're behind on mortgage payments," he muttered. "And with your brother's insurance, things got tight." I looked at them both, silent. They waited, hoping I'd say something comforting. Finally, I asked, "Where's Derek?" Mom swallowed hard. He moved to California. His coaching friend offered him a place. We didn't want to tell you until he was settled." I blinked. "So let me get this straight. You bought him a car, couldn't pay the loan. He drove it across the country, and now you're sitting here with overdue bills." Her lips trembled. "Clara, please," I laughed. "I didn't mean to, but it came out raw, sharp. No, Mom, don't please me now. You told me we couldn't afford college. You made me give up my dreams so Derek could play hero, and now you want my help." She burst into tears. I didn't know things would go this way, but deep down I think she did. Parents always know when they're playing favorites, they just pretend not to. That night I went home and sat in my small studio apartment. The city outside was alive, neon and noisy, but I felt nothing. Then slowly I began to think, what if I could help them but not how they expect? What if the same broke daughter they once ignored could walk into their lives with power? With proof that I didn't just survive, I thrived. That thought became my fire. 2 months later, Cree Studio exploded. One of Lydia's clients, a Chicago influencer with 500,000 followers, wore one of my pieces to an event. It went viral overnight, orders tripled, my inbox overflowed. I had to hire 2 assistants just to manage requests. Lydia, proud as ever, called me one evening and said, "You're officially not just local anymore, kid. You're a brand." And she was right. By fall, I had $220,000 sitting in my account, all mine. And the irony, my parents still thought I was working odd freelance gigs. Then came the moment that sealed my revenge. Mom called again. "Clara, honey, I hate to ask, but we might lose the house. We need $150,000 to pay off the bank or they'll foreclose." Her voice cracked mid-sentence. "Please, sweetheart, you're doing so well with your designs. Maybe you can." I almost smiled. The same number she once refused to spend on my college tuition, she now begged me for. $150,000. I repeated softly. "Yes," she whispered. "If we can pay that, the bank will give us a chance to refinance." I took a deep breath, pretending to think. "Sure, Mom," I said. "Come by tomorrow. I'll have something for you." That night, I printed something from my email, the acceptance letter from the art school I never got to attend. I folded it neatly, slid it into an envelope, and sealed it shut. The next morning, when she arrived, she looked hopeful but exhausted. "Did you manage to get it?" she asked immediately. I handed her the envelope. "Take this instead," I said quietly. She smiled through her tears. "Oh, Clara, thank you. I knew I could count on." But when she opened it, the smile froze. Her eyes scanned the letter, the one she'd forced me to give up years ago. Her face turned pale. "WH, what is this?" she stammered. I leaned back on the couch, arms folded. "That, Mom, is what you canceled for me. My dream, my education. The future you decided wasn't worth the money while you were busy buying Derek a car. That's the $150,000 I never got." She looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. Her knees buckled, and for a second I thought she might faint. "Clara," she whispered, trembling, "you don't understand. We were—" "No, Mom," I interrupted coldly. "I understand perfectly. You prioritized convenience over commitment. You built Derek's dream and buried mine, and now you want me to save yours." Tears spilled down her face. "Please, we'll lose everything." I stood up, picking up my coat. "Then maybe you'll finally understand how it feels to lose everything that matters." And with that, I walked out. For weeks, I ignored their calls. Each voicemail sounded weaker, smaller, sadder. At first, it felt satisfying, then heavy, but I wasn't done yet. I didn't want them homeless, just humbled. So I did something unexpected. I called the bank, not to pay their debt, but to buy it. Through my LLC, Cree Studio, I legally purchased the outstanding mortgage under a third-party shell company. It took 3 weeks of paperwork and one sharp lawyer, but by the end, the house they once ruled over was mine. Technically, they still lived there, they just didn't know I was now their landlord. A month later, they received a letter, property management transfer notice. All future mortgage payments should be directed to your new holder, CR Property Group. Mom called me, panicked. "Clara, did you hear about this? Some company bought our mortgage." I smiled into the phone. "Really, that's crazy." She sighed. "We don't know what to do. I just hope they're reasonable." "Oh, I'm sure they are," I said sweetly. Over the next few months, I quietly let them rebuild their pride, make partial payments, and think life was back on track. Then, one winter afternoon, I mailed them a letter from CR Property Group. It read, "Dear residents, your property has been fully settled by private acquisition. You are no longer responsible for further payments. Ownership has been transferred to a private beneficiary." They were stunned. Mom called immediately, crying, "We're free. Some angel investor saved us. I can't believe this." I didn't answer the call. I just smiled and looked out at the Chicago skyline, snow falling softly on my window. Revenge doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes it's silent, smart, beautiful, because while they celebrated freedom, they still lived in a house I owned, and that, I decided, was enough. By the time spring came back to Chicago, the city didn't feel the same anymore. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was what success does. It changes not just your view of the world, but how the world looks back at you. I'd built everything they thought I couldn't. Cree Studio was no longer a local name. Our designs had been featured in Elle, Harper's Bazaar, and even a Vogue online segment about young Chicago innovators. I'd moved into a downtown penthouse not to show off, but because I wanted space. Space from the memories, from the smallness I grew up in. Every morning, I'd stand by the window, coffee in hand, and watch the city wake up a blur of taxis, trains, and ambition. The same city that once told me you can't, now echoed back, you did. But even with everything I had, the studio, the team, the success, there was still a part of me that remembered that night by the frosted window. The girl who believed her mother when she said, we can't afford your dreams. That girl was gone. But her ghost still whispered sometimes. One Friday afternoon, Lydia called me from the boutique. Guess what? She said, excitement in her voice. You just got invited to the Global Fashion Gala in Paris. They want Cree Studio on the runway next month. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. Paris, the dream city, the ultimate validation. I laughed, breathless. Are you serious? As a heart attack, Lydia said, start packing, superstar. When the call ended, I sat there in silence. I thought of my mother, the woman who once made me feel like an expense. And now her broke daughter was going to Paris. That night, out of habit, I checked my email, and there it was, a message from Mom. The subject line read, we need to talk. I almost deleted it, but something stopped me. When I opened it, the words were shaky, emotional. Clara, I know I don't deserve to ask this, but I need to see you. Please, just one dinner. Your father and I want to apologize. I can't stop thinking about what we did. You have every right to hate us, but I just want to talk. I stared at the screen. My chest tightened, not from anger this time, but from something quieter. A mix of pain, pity, and maybe just a hint of forgiveness waiting to be born. The next evening, I drove back to the old neighborhood. Same cracked streets, same flickering streetlights, same house, though it wasn't really theirs anymore. Mom opened the door, her eyes immediately watering. Clara, she whispered, almost afraid to believe I'd actually come. The smell of her cooking filled the hallway, and for a second, I was 16 again, standing there with my backpack, telling her about my art project. But then I saw the framed picture of Derek on the wall, him on some California beach, grinning, tan, careless, and the feeling faded. We sat at the table. Dad was quieter than I'd ever seen him. Mom reached for my hand, hesitant. I don't even know where to start. She said softly, we failed you, Clara. We made choices that I'll regret for the rest of my life. Her voice cracked. When I told you we couldn't afford college, I thought I was protecting the family. But really, I was protecting my comfort. Your brother always needed attention. I thought giving him everything would make life easier. But all I did was lose you. I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't need everything. I said quietly, I just needed a chance. Tears rolled down her cheeks, I know, and I'll never forgive myself for taking that away. We sat in silence for a while. Then she took a deep breath. Clara, there's something you should know. Last month, we found out who bought the mortgage. My pulse quickened. She looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. It was you, wasn't it? The letters, the company CR Property Group. I recognized the initials after a while. CR, Clara Reynolds. The room went still. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Mom covered her mouth, shaking her head. My God, you saved us. You bought the house. Why didn't you tell us? I sighed. Because you wouldn't have understood. You would have seen it as charity. I didn't want to humiliate you. I just wanted to end the cycle quietly. She started sobbing again. You had every right to let us lose everything, but instead you gave it back after what we did to you. I interrupted softly. You didn't just take my tuition, Mom. You took my belief that I mattered, but I got it back on my own. I don't need revenge anymore. Dad finally spoke. His voice was low, raspy. You're better than we ever were, Clara. I hope you know that. I smiled faintly. I do now. We talked for hours about the past, about the future, about how regret doesn't erase pain, but sometimes it humbles enough to build something new. When I left, Mom hugged me tightly. For the first time in years, it felt real. A week later, I boarded the plane to Paris. The sky outside was the color of silver silk, the kind I used to dream about designing with. As the city shrank beneath the clouds, I thought about how far I'd come from crying by a window in a freezing apartment to flying first class. Designs in my luggage, dreams in my hands. When I landed in Paris, cameras flashed, reporters called my name. Clara Reynolds, founder of Cree Studio. The show was everything I'd ever imagined: lights, applause, models strutting down the runway wearing my collection. Inspired by Chicago winters, the cold that once hurt me now turned into art. When the final spotlight hit, I stepped onto the stage. The crowd rose to its feet. Applause thundered, and in that moment I realized this wasn't revenge anymore. It was resurrection. I turned their doubt into my foundation, their rejection into my power, and somewhere back in Chicago, I knew my mother was watching the live stream, crying, proud, and probably whispering, "That's my daughter." After the show, I went to a quiet cafe by the Seine. The air smelled like rain and perfume. I opened my journal and wrote one sentence: "Success doesn't shout, it shines." And as I closed the notebook, I smiled, because the girl who once believed her worth depended on her family's approval finally knew the truth: her worth was never theirs to define.